Hey everyone, so in today's video I've got two main things I want to go over. So XenoThreat just wrapped up, but I'm going to go over how the mission worked and also give my opinion on how it went, and I look forward to hearing yours in the comments below. And then secondly, I just want to briefly go over the free fly event that's going on. This started on Monday, so I'm just going to briefly go over that at the end. So if you're just here for that free fly information, feel free to use the timestamps to get there, and if you want to support the channel, please consider leaving a like and or subscribing. I really appreciate it. Now let's get started. So the XenoThreat event was named after the pirate group who were the enemy throughout the event, and it had 4 different phases. However, only 2 of those really had any gameplay. So phase 1 was basically just CIG letting everyone know that the event would be starting soon. Phase 2, which was my favorite part, involved a good mix of ship combat and cargo running, and the goal was restocking UEE javelins. Phase 3 was combat only and was a larger scale battle than what happened during Phase 2, and Phase 4 was the celebration after XenoThreat was defeated. Just like anything else, there was a lot of stuff in this event that went really well, but there were some other areas where it was a bit lacking. However, for their first attempt at an event like this, I think it went really well overall. So one of the things that I thought was a strong point for this event was the locations, which were either at this new military station called the INS Jericho or at a wreck site deep within some of the new gas clouds. Starting with the military station, I really liked how this thing looked, and it does look a lot more aggressive than the civilian rest stops. It may just be 2 segments of a security dock spliced together, but I think it works well, and it's pretty functional too. It had a reasonable number of turrets to help out the players with covering fire when XenoThreat was attacking the moored javelin, and also the open pad design allowed for fast landing and unloading of cargo. It didn't really have enough room for bigger ships, but the wide open pad space made it fine to just leave your ship floating and EVA over to sell your stuff. There are a few things that I'd like to see improved in the future though, if they go for another event that's somewhat similar to this. So I think the main complaint everyone had with this station is the fact that you couldn't rearm or repair here. So if you needed to do so in the middle of the mission, which you did constantly if you were in a bomber, you were forced to go all the way over to Microtech L1, which isn't that far away, but it takes you out of the combat for a pretty decent amount of time. Also, since the Idris has massive shield capacity, even people in fighters were probably going to be using ballistics, so most people at some point were going to have to rearm during the fight, and it would have been a lot more convenient to be able to do so quickly over at this station. There were multiple occasions where not having access to this station to rearm and repair made me miss important moments of the fight, like an Idris going down or just missing the entire ending to the mission. So I'd really like in the future for an actual home base right next to the fighting to be available to players, especially in an event like this where it's only available for a certain number of time and then it goes away for about an hour or so. It's really a shame to have to leave the mission for so long if something goes wrong or if you're just out of ammo. And the same thing goes for if you died. You were sent all the way back to your last spawn point, which would only be Microtech L1 if you had time to change it before the event started. And if you didn't and got sent to somewhere far away like Hurston, or were really unlucky and got sent to prison somehow, you'd probably be missing out on the rest of that mission. So yeah, in the future it would be nice to have some sort of way as a player to get right back into the action after something happens, and I really hope they consider that. Also, one other thing that might be nice is for the station to have a hangar or 2 available on request for landing, in case you have an especially big haul of materials. While I was pretty lucky to not encounter many griefers during my playtime, they definitely still exist, so I think it would be nice to have a safer, slower option for offloading in addition to the convenience of the exposed landing pads. I would have been really annoyed if my ship full of tiny crates that I had meticulously loaded in there with a tractor beam got pad rammed, and adding a couple of hangars could easily prevent this. Now moving on to the other main location for this mission, I think the wreck sites looked amazing and they played really well too. It was really cool to have all the disabled starfarers showing up on radar and then flying towards them until they finally poked their way through the fog. The gas cloud tech isn't perfect yet, and there were times when I'd get weird things on my screen that looked like glitches, and it often obscured the UEE javelin from way too close in my opinion, but I think it looks way better than just empty space. It also meant that the lighting throughout the process of trying to get your ship right up against the wrecks for faster loading, and then for the loading process itself, was pretty easy to work with. With the light from Stanton being diffused in the gas clouds, you didn't have as drastic of a difference as usual between the light and dark side of things, which could have been a real pain to work with otherwise. In open space, it's often impossible to see stuff on the dark side of wrecks, so I think the gas clouds were actually functionally nice for this event too. So yeah, for this part of the mission, in terms of locations, I had no real issues with it, besides I guess the potential to blow yourself up on some random piece of debris, but that comes down to pilot error. Now for gameplay, I'm going to discuss it by phase. So starting with phase 2, I personally preferred this phase, and I think a lot of you did too based on the poll I ran. So thank you all for voting in this, by the way. I got a lot more responses than I thought I would, and it was nice to hear you guys' opinions. So a brief overview of this phase is you were trying to help the UEE restock some of its javelins that were docked at the INS Jericho station nearby, and you were doing this by collecting 3 different types of materials from the wreck site and then bringing them back to the station. Intermittently while you're doing this, pirates would be attacking you at the wreck site, and they'd also try to take out the docked javelin every once in a while. And if you didn't adequately protect the javelin from the enemy force, which included an Idris, the mission would fail because the javelin would have to retreat. This mission overall I think was really cool because it brought a lot of different parts of Star Citizen together in a pretty fun way. The cargo you had to deliver came in 3 different types, so you'd have a different kind of strategy for each of them. One of them would deteriorate over time, so you'd want to take smaller loads of that and be as fast as possible. Another type deteriorated with impact, so you generally want those in a bigger ship so that you had space to spread them out so that if one blew up, they didn't all blow up. And then the last type had to be flown without using quantum travel, so you'd want a really fast ship for these. Like I mentioned in my video dedicated to this phase, this was some of the most fun I've had hauling cargo in a while, and I really hope that they make these new materials available to trade because they could really spice up trading. Also, the new tractor beam worked really well for this. I'm surprised how well they've gotten it working, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what scaled up tractor beams, maybe like the one that's on the SRV, might be used for. But yeah, it was nice to have the option to not have to EVA with every single box. That would have been really tedious. So if you enjoyed this sort of high stakes loading and hauling gameplay, phase 2 was great, but if you were only really interested in combat, it wasn't the best. So at the wreck site, there were a few NPC pirates that you'd have to take care of every few minutes, but there weren't a ton. Now I think this was good because if you were constantly being shot at as you were loading your ship, the mission would have been pretty near impossible, but escorting the cargo pilots on this mission wasn't the best or most engaging. But then for the part where the Idris was attacking the javelin, it was a pretty easy fight, but it was also easy to fail as well if you didn't have enough people there. If it had a chance to get that railgun on target, it would make pretty quick work of the javelin's health bar, and oftentimes you'd have pretty short notice on when this attack was going to start. Now I think for in-game realism, this short notice makes sense, but in terms of fun gameplay, I didn't really like it. Like I mentioned, most of the time during this phase there wasn't a ton to do as a combat ship pilot, so there weren't a ton of them on call because it was a pretty boring job. Now on the other hand, there was a lot of cargo to be hauled, but because of the short notice and the fact that you couldn't actually land and change ships at the Jericho station, if you were in a hauler as the fight was starting, you'd be stuck in it for the fight. There were a couple of times when I was running cargo with my Caterpillar, but then we had to go back and defend the Javelin against the Idris, and I was kind of stuck there, trying to contribute but not really doing all that much. But at least they implemented a pretty nice payment system that paid out to everyone working on the mission every time you either killed a certain number of pirates or delivered a certain amount of cargo. So failing wasn't as frustrating as it could have been if you didn't get any payout at all. And I would say overall the event compensated the players more than fairly in terms of the amount of UEC that you got from it. One thing I want to briefly bring up for phase 2 is the issue of griefing. So I didn't really encounter any issues while I was doing the mission, but there were many complaints of people stealing ships, or ramming, or just being an overall nuisance throughout the event. I don't want to spend too much time discussing the type of players who do this, or what sort of in-game motivation could have been modified to change their behavior, because let's face it, there's always going to be people who just want to mess up other people's gameplay, and nothing's really going to change that. However, a better loss system would let players fight back and be less disrupted by these sorts of players. So I think the biggest issue right now is identification of people with a Crimestat, and especially on foot. This is a feature that really needs to come soon because it's hard to even tell apart the NPC enemies that were on some of the wrecks from friendly players. And in a game like Star Citizen that'll send you to prison for shooting the wrong person, we really need to be able to know who's friendly and who's not. So I think that's going to be a pretty straightforward fix because they just need to add something to the HUD to be able to identify friendly versus enemy targets on foot. But some of the other issues that were most annoying to players are going to be a little bit trickier to fix. One of these is accidental friendly fire, which is bound to happen when you have so many people crowded around the same target, and with the current system, there's no tolerance to it at all, so it's really easy to get a Crimestat for this. There are some good solutions that have been proposed for this, like a certain threshold of damage being done within a certain period of time, or even just something like Crimestat level 1 and 2 offenders showing up differently from those with worse offenses, but I think this should be addressed before the next event, because it would be really annoying to just slightly damage someone else's shield and then have to spend an hour or more going to prison or clearing your Crimestat. And then the last thing related to the loss system that I want to bring up is being able to defend your ship. This affects the game in more areas than just the scope of this mission, but I find it somewhat ridiculous that you aren't able to defend your ship from trespassers. Of course, there will be people who say, oh, just lock your doors or something like that, but even if that mitigates the issue, I still think that going on someone else's ship uninvited should constitute a crime, or at least defending your ship from those people should not be a crime. And even with locked doors, people can pretty easily glitch into your ship, or on some ships the locks just don't work at all, or there are events like XenoThreat where you need to be able to have your ship doors open for loading purposes. So yeah, that's one of my current biggest pet peeves with the law system, and while I know a fully functioning law system is going to be a very hard thing to get working perfectly, I think some sort of ship defense law change could be added at least. Let me know you guys' thoughts on this in the comments though. Okay, so then moving on to phase 3 of the mission, this was the big capital ship battle. So at first you got sent the mission notification and you just go to a quantum beacon and face off against the XenoThreat fleet, which was one Idris and some other support craft including a few hammerheads and a lot of smaller fighters. Then after defeating the first Idris, XenoThreat would bring in 2 of them at once, but thankfully most of the time you'd get a UEE Javelin to come in and back you up. So this was a lot more simplistic than phase 2 I would say, but it was still a lot of fun. I do wish the Javelin was a bit faster to respond though, because I only really got to see it get involved like one of the times out of the many that I tried this event. With the combination of players working together really well to take out XenoThreat quickly, plus having to rearm pretty frequently, and the general fogginess of the area, it was kinda easy to miss seeing the Javelin, which is a weird thing to be saying about an almost 500 meter long ship. But when it did get involved and it was ripping through ships with those quad-sized 10 turrets, it was a real sight to see. I can only imagine what it will be capable of once its torpedo tubes come online. Size 9 torpedoes are already deadly, so I can only imagine what a size 12 is gonna do. So yeah, overall, this part was really fun, and was basically just an improved version of the Arlington Gang Idris mission, and my only real gripes were what I talked about earlier with restocking and missing parts of the fight. So the last part of XenoThreat wasn't really a mission, but just a nice celebration of the community's accomplishments in fighting back against the pirates. As you can see here, the INS Jericho basically got turned into a constant fireworks display, which looks pretty cool. I kinda wish there was some sort of reward for completing it, maybe a helmet or other in-game item like was given away for the Halloween event last year to commemorate the occasion, but I'm sure there's gonna be stuff like that for future missions. So overall, I really enjoyed XenoThreat, and especially for being the first event of its kind, I think it went quite well. I can't wait to see what CIG puts together in the future. And although at first I was a little worried that these events might sidetrack development, I did watch the Star Citizen Live where they went into more detail about XenoThreat and what sort of changes it caused to the development, and it doesn't really seem like these in-game events are going to be that much of an issue. Also, most of you guys seem to enjoy the event, and I did for sure, so even if it causes a slight delay, I think it might be worth it to help ease the eternal wait for updates. Okay, so for this last part, I just want to go over the process for getting into the free fly because CIG, like always, has made it a bit complicated. So if you're a new player, you're going to want to make an account, and if you want to support the channel and get yourself an extra 5,000 Alpha UEC, you can use my referral code that's in the description. Then you're going to want to go to the free fly info page, which is a bit hard to find, so I have it linked below as well, and then you copy the code and paste it into the box. I don't know why they make it so that you have to do this, but there's no way around it. If you are already a player though, you might want to do this as well though, because if you don't already have access to all 6 of these ships that are listed here on this page, you will get access to them by doing this for the duration of the free fly. But yeah, if you're a new player, once you do this, you'll probably want to watch some tutorials, of which there are many great ones on my channel and other Star Citizen channels across YouTube, or you can come over to my Discord where there's a lot of great veteran players who can give you some tips on getting started. So yeah, if you've been looking to try out the game, you have a couple of weeks to do so, and if you're a veteran player, you have some free ships to play around with for that time as well. So that's all I have for this video, but if you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.